Hi guys, I wanted to talk about using a loom as what they call like a double rake. And as you can see, I've already got a project on here. It's a scarf I'm working on. And what it means when you use it as a double rake is you're going to be using both sides of your loom at once. If you had an end peg, say there was a peg right here, you wouldn't be using it. You're only going to be using what's parallel to each other. And there's different stitches you can do. Excuse me. But what it does is it basically works up a nice, kind of fluffier, depending on the stitch, like scarf, baby blanket, maybe even parts to like a poncho and such. And it's really easy to do, and I'm using a really like soft yarn here. And we do have to keep in mind of the stitches at the end, which I'll explain. Well, the beginning stitches actually. I'll explain what you do about them to keep them from coming apart. But this is what we're going to show, is basically how to do a double rake. So let me get my yarn and we'll get started. I'm going to show you that I'm using with this project here is the basic figure 8 stitch. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to cast on over here to show you how to do the process. You're going to create your slip knot like normal, leaving yourself the tail. We're going to actually use this tail to help pull the project through. So we're just going to cast on a couple rows and we're going to push that tail down in. I'm using the all-in-one loom, and it comes with the different spacers on the end that you can adjust how far apart they are. I wanted to go for what was closest on the inside. So what we're going to do is we're going to just let that kind of go down the middle. We're going to grab our working yarn. I'm going to tighten it just a little bit so it's on there. You can kind of use this to hold in place if you want. And we're going to figure 8 it down as many pegs as you want. You could do the whole loom as this, or you can just do a section like I'm going to do. And what we're going to do is we're going to figure 8 it. When you think of the figure 8, you're basically wrapping it. I kind of think of it as like a ladder, like you're working your way down the rungs of a ladder and you're just happening to turn your yarn. Okay, so we got a few stitches on. Now we want to work our way back. So all we're going to do is we're going to push down these stitches so we have a little more room to work with. And you're going to follow your way back, pretty much mimicking what you just did. So you're going to look for where you went, and you're just going to mimic that on the way back. So you should be able to have all your pegs, all your your pegs and your yarn pattern should line up. So you're just going to work your way back over. Now you're just going to bring this up here, because that's where you're stopping. Hold it in place. Grab your tool. Again, this is the Sheffield pick tools that I showed in one of my videos. And we're just going to knit over. And I'm keeping this very basic. I'm not going to talk about color changes. I'm just talking about the basic figure 8 stitch, which makes up a nice scarf or flat panel that you want to use for something else. But you can change out colors. There is a way to do that, and I will show that in possibly another video. And again, you've got your working yarn, so make sure you give that a little tug just so it stays out of the way, or your tail. And we're going to go ahead and keep knitting over. Now, the yarn I'm using on this side is a weight of 4. Pretty much the typical yarn that most people would use. The Red Heart, Super Saver yarn, I believe it is. I don't know what I just did with the... it's, excuse me. It's called Coral, and it's a weight of like a 4, which is like a medium weight yarn. So this will work up a little different than the yarn you see over on the other part of the project, because that was a 3. Now you may not be able to, if you have the all-in-one loom and you have it down to this small, you may not be able to use super bulky yarn because it may not work as well as something that's a little thinner. So but a lot of it with loom knitting is just experimenting and see what actually will work. So make sure you push these down, and when you work your way back again, you're going to follow that same pattern back over. So you should be able to kind of see it line up to what you've already done. And it does take, depending on the loom, a little bit of time to see the project actually work through. Oops, messed up there. Okay, and you go until you would end, and this time we're holding it down this way before we knit it over. Again, you'll be holding it differently when you do it, so it'll be a little easier. And I'm going to tilt this so I can see. And basically that's what the figure 8 stitch, when you're using it as a double rake, is all about. It's basically wrapping the loom basically like a figure H, knitting it over on both sides, and then just gently pushing it down into the loom so that it'll work itself out the other side. Now what we have to consider is once this works itself out to the other side, we actually have to turn around and kind of bind off those first stitches that we did. And I can show you how to do that once we get this past this part. So again, that row's done, so we're going to gently push them down. And this is where you kind of sometimes can turn it to see how we're doing. Is it coming through? Maybe give this a little tug. It's going to be a while before it actually comes through the project, or through the loom. So this is the figure 8 stitch. You're working back and forth, trying to get a thicker yarn. So I'm going to go off camera and work this down until you can see it through the bottom part of the loom, and then I will show you how to go and kind of bind off the first stitches. This nice edge that you see here doesn't appear like this. When you're doing your project, it will not look like this until you cast it off after it's come through the loom. So let me go ahead and work the project a little farther, and then we'll show you that part. Okay guys, I worked it a little bit further so you can kind of see how it comes out of the loom, and as you can see, it's got that kind of stretch to it. But what we have to worry about now is these stitches that are on the very end, because as you can see over here, we have a nice edge. This is how it comes out of the loom first, and we want to make it so it's locked into place so that it obviously doesn't unravel or anything like that. So kind of turn your loom upside down if you want, so to speak, and start at the opposite end. We've got our working tail here, but let's start at this end, and we're going to grab some of the first stitches. We're going to put it on our crochet hook, we're going to put another stitch on, and then we're just going to move the one from the back up to the one in the front. Grab another stitch, move the back over to the front, kind of work your way on those first stitches, working gently across to help bind off the end line here. And as you can see behind us, I missed one right there, but as you can see behind us, it's creating that nicer edge there. And when we get close to our tail, what you're going to do is you're going to wrap the tail around the crochet hook and pull it through. And if you've got 2 loops on there, that's fine. You're going to pull that through so you have a loop, and then you're going to take the working yarn again through it and then pull it. And what that's going to do is help to lock it in place a little more. As you see, it's got that little more sturdy. Now I did miss one over here, so what you can do is just make sure you're grabbing them all. I missed a couple, but I can go back and I can kind of gently put it back on, or figure it out. This won't hurt anything right now anyway. We're more worried about how it looks right here. So make sure when you're working your way across that you really try to just be gentle with whatever loops you see along the edge, and try to bind them off basically, so that you have a tighter edge. But this is what it looks like coming off the loom with a weight of 4, and it's kind of a cool thing. Now when it comes to the part of, well, how do we take this off once we get the project the length that we want? And this is where it's a little tricky. You do need your crochet hook, and you will need a pair of scissors as well for at the end, but you don't need, as far as they tell you, shouldn't need this unless you have trouble getting any of the loops off. But what you have to actually do is work backwards, kind of thing. We're going to work from the end part to where our working yarn is, and we're going to alternate going back and forth. So what I'm actually going to do is turn the loom a little bit so it's a little easier for me to show you. Excuse me. And I'm going to cut myself a long tail, good 12 inches or so. Now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to pick up one of the stitches at the very end and put it on my crochet hook. Again, if you need your tool to help lift it off, you can go ahead and lift it off and put it on your crochet hook. Now turn it and go to the opposite side and grab that one. So again, you have 2 on there. Move the back over to the front. Now turn it to come back over this way. It's pretty much kind of like what we did on the first stitches to bind off. It's just we have to work it in a little bit different pattern. And work very slowly. Don't rush taking it off the loom. The last thing you want to do is rush and then come up with an error. So just take your time, gently moving your way back and forth until you get to where the beginning yarn is. Again, we're just turning it. Think of it as going up like a ladder, where you're just kind of working one rung at a time. And that's all it is to get till you get back to the start. And working back and forth. Okay. Now granted, this side right here is going to have the working yarn, but we're still going to knit over. Here's our working yarn right here. I'm going to grab that last peg, or the loop off that last peg, knit it over, and kind of pull it through. And as you see, we get that nice finished edge. But we got to finish it all the way off by taking the working yarn and wrapping it around your crochet hook and pulling it through the project. And then giving it a little tug. And sometimes what I like to do is go back in to another loop and re-grab that working yarn again and bring it through a little ways, as you can see, and then grab it again and bring it all, oops, and then grab it from behind again to bring it all through again. It just, for me, it makes me feel a little more safer to make sure it's all locked in. And this is just a swatch done on that. You get the still loose at the top and still loose at the bottom, but it just makes for a nice, like if you want, like I said, if you want to do a scarf, it kind of helps the yarn be fluffed up. And as you can see, it's got a good thickness to it when you do it as a rake versus a flat panel. I have done scarves this way before, and I also have done them as a flat panel. It's really your choice. And again, this is just a figure 8 stitch. There are other stitches you can do on the rake that I hope to show you at a later time. So I hope this helps, and have fun with it. And again, later I'll show you how you can kind of change out a color. The reason, just to let you know that you can see some mistakes, is the brown is actually a weight of like 3, so it's a little thinner than this yarn. So that does matter when you want to change color. I would recommend a weight of 4 for all the yarn colors you want to change, because a 3 would only work if you're doing it all one color through. But again, that's for another tutorial, but I hope you like this, showing you just how you can do a scarf, or you can do a baby blanket. You can make, possibly if you have the right yarn for making pot holders, you could do that. So go ahead, you could do these as pieces and use them for like a sweater. So I mean, just have fun with it, and I hope this helps.